Hello ladies and gentlemen, Ollie here and welcome back to the channel once again. This is another video in the medical school interview preparation series. Today we're going to be talking about whether tobacco should be legal for sale in the UK or not. And I do want to do another video on illicit drugs, as well as this one on tobacco, but that's going to be a separate article because although reflexively I think a lot of the issues might seem to be the same, they are slightly different, so each of these topics is going to get their own video. So this time we're talking about the sale of cigarettes. And I'm just going to simply run through some yes or no arguments in this case. I don't think you'd be required to do much more than that, but you should be able to argue for either side as effectively as the other, regardless of your position. So to begin with, from a purely libertarian perspective, everything is about autonomy. If someone is willing to spend money to buy cigarettes and those cigarettes are available for sale, that's completely their choice. If I want to walk into a shop and buy some cigarettes and then smoke them, even if I know that they're very bad and damaging for my health and going to increase my risk of every disease known to man, ultimately, if I want to smoke them, that's my choice. In a free society, we should be able to do that. Secondly, and this is a very big one, cigarette sales are a phenomenal source of tax income for the government. And some of that money is obviously recycled and put back into the healthcare system and public services. So even though people who buy and smoke cigarettes may be damaging their own health, that money is actually going towards other people in some small part. You will also upset a huge market if you remove cigarettes from sale in the UK. Think about all the jobs in manufacturing, sales, marketing, analysis, etc., that is tied to the cigarette industry. You'll potentially be putting thousands of people out of work, which will obviously then mean they have less money coming in, they'll be less able to pay their tax, which is going back into healthcare provision, and their health outcomes will probably get worse because of their lowered income. Another example might be that we don't arbitrarily just ban things that are bad for us. Like, it would be perfectly acceptable for me to go skydiving today, for example, or get in a glider, or even drive on a busy motorway. All of these things have some degree of inherent risk associated with them, but we all do them anyway as a matter of course. That's just normal. For example, alcohol remains perfectly legal in the UK, and we see the impact that that has on people every single day. Just go to your local A&E, but that remains legal. It would be very difficult to imagine a move to ban cigarettes when you still have alcohol for sale, for example. And lastly, there's the historical argument to be made. We know that prohibition of substances tends not to work. All that happens if you make a substance illegal is that you shift the power from the hands of the consumer into the criminal gangs. This then makes the conditions involved for those people who will still remain addicted to cigarettes. They will still feel the need to smoke them, but now they've got to do it in much more dangerous conditions. And they're also a lot less likely to go and see a doctor if they have negative symptoms and ill effects, because of the presumption that they might be reported if those symptoms are obviously linked to cigarette smoking, and that's a world that no one wants. So now let's have a look at some arguments in favour of removing cigarettes from sale and having them banned. I think the first and most obvious is the fact that they are linked to many diseases and present a serious health risk, particularly some obvious examples for things like lung cancer and cardiovascular disease. It could be argued that by allowing the sale of cigarettes in the UK, the government is condoning their use and might present that they don't care about the ill effects that these cigarettes are having on the population. The second argument that could be made is that many smokers will not actually be pleasure smokers, and I think studies that have been done on this indicate that pleasure smokers, so that is people who smoke because they actively enjoy it, the numbers of them are actually relatively small. Most people are addicted to the nicotine and other substances in the cigarettes, and they smoke because basically they want to relieve the effects of nicotine withdrawal. They don't actively enjoy it. So what you have is a situation where cigarette manufacturers and companies are profiting from a situation where people are biologically dependent on this substance and can't really stop under their own control most of the time. And that situation presents kind of an ethical dilemma within itself. You're balancing off autonomy against the best interests of people. But when autonomy gets involved, we see the other big elephant in the room, which is secondhand smoke. You know, my autonomy allows me to smoke a cigarette if I want to, as long as I accept the health risks that go along with it. But now there's an externality that has to be dealt with, and that is the smoke that comes off the cigarettes. We know that secondhand smoke is now associated with deleterious effects, and even though I might be okay with the health risks of smoking, you know, if that smoke blows across other people, I have no right to impose that negative situation on them. I am then interfering with their autonomy. Basically, why should smokers be allowed to affect other people who have no choice in the matter when the smoke is just airborne and no one has any control? There's also an element of pollution that you could talk about. You know, people often, you see cigarette butts in drains, a lot are just left on the street, and they're putting pollutants into the air. That's an argument you could make. So there's a few arguments kind of in favour of keeping cigarettes for sale or not allowing the sale of them in the UK. I'm just going to present a couple more very general points now. These are kind of my takes and the things that I would be keen to point out in an interview situation. The first being that the banning of cigarettes and the removing of them from society is never ever going to happen. You know, as long as our society stays the way it is, in a capitalist structure that we have, it's just not going to happen. You'd have to start shooting people eventually, or throwing them in prison, and there'd be a revolution a long time before that happened. So what can society do in the meantime to try and address the problems of cigarettes, of which there are very many, in a practical manner? And I think the first thing we can do is make sure that people are suitably informed about the dangers of smoking cigarettes. We say, look, you are perfectly within your rights to smoke if you want to, that's on you. In order to maximise your autonomy and your ability to make informed choices, we're going to give you the information that we think is relevant. So we see on cigarette packaging now, you know, smoking kills or smoking increases risk of cancer, all these things. The NHS could do things like targeted advert spots, which are presentations. They could do online marketing, offer good smoking cessation services. All of these things are going to help people give up smoking. And that's ultimately what we want, I think, a world in which people can smoke if they want to, but one where they also don't remain biological slaves to the substances forever. And the other thing, of course, that we've seen is the banning of smoking in many public places. So bars and pubs are the obvious example, where you can no longer smoke. Restaurants. I know even on many university campuses it says everywhere, please don't smoke, because there are other people around. So pragmatically speaking, we want to inform the populace, we want to allow them to smoke if they want to, but make sure that when the time comes when they don't want to anymore, that we make that transition as seamless and attainable as possible for them, because that's associated with better health outcomes for everyone. And the other element is that we try and protect non-smokers from the effects of smokers. I think those are, practically speaking, going to be the best things that we can continue to do as a society, and hopefully all those points, when brought together, should give you a decent chance at dealing with that interview question should it come up. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Please be sure to hit that like button for me, leave a comment, subscribe, and don't forget to go and check out PostGradMedic.com for more free videos and articles just like this one, and will help you get to medical school. Remember to hit the notification bell if you haven't already, and you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at PostGradMedic. Send me a message or let me know what you think in the comments below. Take care and I'll see you next time.